Just a closer walk with thee. Grant me, darling, if you please, daily walking close to thee. Dear darling, dear sweetheart, let it be, let it be. So my intention for the Lens of Love community, this online membership I'm creating, is that it will offer you a space to learn to drop the filter of judgment that you see yourself through, so you can see yourself through the lens of love. So what does that mean? I think most of us, or a lot of us anyway, see ourselves through a filter which is invisible, and it's made of thought, made of beliefs. And we see ourselves through that filter, and we don't realise that filter exists. And the way I've experienced that very clearly in my life, in one area, is in terms of what I look like and my body. So I would see my body and, feel awful about it when I didn't think it looked good. And I would just think I looked awful, but I wouldn't see that was coming from, not from my body, but from my thinking about my body, from judgments I had, which were largely invisible, but I just felt the effect of them. And the more I became aware that there was that filter, the more possible it's become for me to see myself without that filter. And when that filter drops, what is naturally there is love. And I feel like love expands what we're able to appreciate and how we see the world. But that's just one way that we can view ourselves through the filter of judgment. There are so many ways that we judge ourselves. We might think that we are not clever enough, not capable enough, don't achieve enough, don't parent well enough. There are endless ways that we can torture ourselves with our thinking. And the purpose of this community is really to remind us of what's important and to reconnect us with that love that is there within us and is so important for every aspect of our lives. So I've spoken about how realizing that we often see ourselves through a judgmental filter, harsh filter, can help us to experience what is beyond that filter, what is underneath it, which is love. Another way of talking about that is to say that when we have that experience, when we have that insight, we typically experience less suffering and more well-being. That's certainly been the case for me, and I know for many other people. And it's not that we don't experience any suffering. I personally don't believe that that's the way it goes with human life. I'm not saying join my community and you won't suffer again. Unfortunately, I can't promise that. But it has been my experience that I suffer less. And it's not even that the filter always goes away. Sometimes the filter is still there, but it's more that I know it's there and I stop trusting it as much. And so it doesn't have the same power over me. But a filter isn't necessarily just about how we judge ourselves harshly and think we're not worthy of love because of some frailty that we have, or something we're not good at, or because of how we look. It can also manifest as the idea that we can't cope with what life throws at us. And perhaps that's a slightly less obvious manifestation. But it is still a filter, because a filter, by definition, is something that narrows what you can see. And when you're under that spell, if you like, and seeing through that filter, you are not in touch with all of your resources and all your capabilities. You have a narrowed, distorted view of who you are. And so when we drop that filter, we feel more capable and more confident, less anxious, and we're less likely to fall into despair. And I suppose that's where perhaps my perspective differs from some religions, some belief systems, which talk about God as something outside of ourselves and externalize love, kindness, wisdom. The way I see it, for what it's worth, it's a long history of that, is that that's very understandable, because when you see the terrible things that human beings can do, have done, are capable of, it's understandable to want to escape from that, in a sense, by turning to something outside of yourself. But it can be very disempowering, and for what it's worth, I don't think it's accurate, in that it's all coming from within us and flowing through us. You know, we have the capacity to do good, we have the capacity to do evil, we have the capacity to function well, make a positive contribution, and we also have the capacity to fall apart. And what makes the difference? It is, wait for it, it's largely where we place our attention. Which thoughts do we run with, and which thoughts do we let float on by? We have the power to discern which thoughts are helpful to us. But because we're always thinking, and perhaps we don't think about this aspect of how our experience of life works, we don't always realise that, and we don't always slow down enough to discern which thoughts to follow and which thoughts to let go. But the more we can realise that we do have that power, the less frightening life becomes, and we start to have an expanded view of what we're capable of, because we always have that choice, and we know that we have that choice no matter what happens. So one thing that I hope you'll use my community for is to take some time to slow down and become aware of what you're thinking, possibly share that, and then to discern what is useful to you and what is helpful to other people and the world. So I've made it sound very easy and straightforward. All you have to do is review your thoughts, check which ones are helpful, go with them and ignore all the others. But in reality, it doesn't really feel quite as neat, as easy or as straightforward as that. It can feel a lot messier, because our thoughts come with really powerful feelings, and they can be really intense and make the thoughts that they're flowing from feel really compelling. And so it can feel quite scary to feel those emotions, and unpleasant. We don't always want to feel anxious, angry, jealous, sad. So another thing I'd like to invite you to use my community for is to learn how to navigate your emotions wisely. And that's a journey that I'm still very much on. I have a lot to learn. I feel like I've learned a little bit so far. But I think I'll be learning about this for the rest of my life, and it'll be lovely to learn with you together in the community. So what do I mean by wisely? Well, here's sort of my sense of it so far. I really believe that all our emotions can be our teachers, even the ones that we tend to demonize, like anger and jealousy. There's always something to learn from them. But in order to learn from them, we have to honour them, we have to feel them, and we have to make room for them. We can't just always run away from them, try to numb out, try not to feel them. I mean, as human beings, we'll lapse into that. But when that becomes chronic, like for example with me with eating, I would eat or even not eat to try not to feel my emotions, then it can cause a lot of problems. We can develop addictions, and then we start to think that we've got a problem with an addiction, when often the root of it is that we are scared of feeling our feelings. I think because they can feel so overwhelming, and often when we're in them, it can feel like they're going to last forever, and that they mean something often very negative about us, our value, our ability to function, our ability to meet the challenges of life. So I think that feeling our emotions is really healthy, and it's a lot healthier than pushing them away. So I'd like to encourage you to embrace your emotions and learn from them. But the message that they have for us is not always immediately obvious. So let's say you feel angry and you have the thought that you want to hit someone or you want to shout at them. Occasionally, shouting might be appropriate, but when we act impulsively like that, we often end up acting destructively or self-destructively and doing things we regret. But that doesn't mean that there's not something for us to learn from that emotion. It could be we need to set a boundary. It could be we need more sleep. It could be we need to take care of ourselves better in a certain way. But we won't know what that is unless we feel the emotion and are really open to learning from it and having that inquiry where we don't assume we already know. And that takes a bit of slowing down. So our emotions can guide us through life. And there's a real beauty in feeling the full range of emotions and learning from them all. And it's something that I'd love to explore with you in the community. So I'd like to share a poem I wrote now, which tries to describe the transformation that I've undergone in terms of how I understand who we really are and how life works. And I want to share a poem because I think sometimes it can be easier to express things in poetry rather than prose, especially things that are difficult and very intangible. And I also want to convey to you the power that this transformation could have in your life. And I think we can really help each other realise the truth of who we are. Okay, so the poem is called We Are Life. I am not who I think I am. I am not small, fragile and weak, at the mercy of events beyond my control. My being is boundless, my spirit is unbreakable, and I am strong. Strong enough to endure the sting of rejection, the horror of cruelty and the agony of loss, and to emerge unscathed and undaunted, with tenderness and humour intact, ready to dive back into the torrent and keep swimming to the next shore. I am the architect of a beautiful life. And when fate shatters my temple into 1,000 pieces, I am the vision to see a new design in the rubble and the patience to create an even holier shrine. I am not who I think I am. I am strength. You are not who you think you are. You are not the harsh judgments, the missed goals, the incomplete to-do list. You are not an overdue assignment. Please don't make the mistake of underestimating your value. Your voice can signal the sweet sound of home to a lost soul. Your smile can fill an aching heart with hope. Your touch can quench the devastating thirst of loneliness. Your ideas can refashion the world in the image of kindness. Your presence has the power to bring colour to a grey and barren landscape. You sparkle more than any jewel. You are beyond compare. You are not who you think you are. You are love. We are not who we think we are. We are not floundering, pathetic wretches, drifting and listless, buffeted by every storm. We are the anchor of our own ship, the long-awaited lighthouse on a perilous voyage. Though our minds fail to predict the future, our bodies provide the map our eyes can't see. We feel our way along the journey, guided by the wisdom arising from the quiet within. Neither suffering nor death can extinguish our flame. We will burn brightly forever. We are not who we think we are. We are peace. We are faith. We are life. So who is the community for? Well, I've made it open to anybody who's interested in making love the driving force of their life. And a lot of my work has been about trying to help people who struggle with eating, exercise, body image, because that's the area where I struggle most and I've found freedom, and I want to share what's helped me with that. But I've deliberately opened up this community to go beyond people who are suffering in that particular way for many reasons. One is I want to welcome as many people as possible, and I don't want people to feel excluded if they don't suffer in that particular way. I also think there's a benefit for everyone to be with people who have different experiences. Because when we really identify with a particular aspect of our thinking, which, you know, understandably, if it's dominating our lives, it can be, you know, easy to feel like we are special and different from the rest of the human race, and other people don't suffer like we do. And that causes a lot of suffering. It adds to our suffering to feel that there's something wrong with us and we're not like other people. But what I found is that that's really not the case, that human beings, even though the specifics of the beliefs that they have and the thinking that they're preoccupied with can vary enormously, the way that suffering works is the same. And the more you talk to people who are being really open and honest and who are willing to be vulnerable, the more you see that. And in my life, that has created a deeper sense of belonging with more people. And there's been a lot of healing in that. It has softened my experience of suffering, because I feel like, oh, we are in this together. So another reason why I want the community to be open to people with a diversity of experience and who suffer in different ways is because what happens is sometimes when we find out that we've got a particular problem and we feel very alone, we might then seek out people who suffer in a similar way. And there can be enormous benefit in that, in terms of feeling less alone, feeling a sense of solidarity with other people. And I want to offer that in my community as well. But there can potentially be a downside. So, imagine there's something that you worry about from time to time, but it's not always kind of on your mind. And then you spend maybe a whole week with somebody who is really worried about that thing, and that's all they talk about all day long. Do you think at the end of that week you are likely to be more worried, less worried, or the same amount of worried about that thing? I mean, my experience is that we are not immune to the things that we hear. We're not immune to our environment. We're impacted by that. And if somebody else is talking about something that kind of worried you, but you could kind of forget about it, but that's all they talk about, there is a potential downside in that can really reinforce those insecurities and concerns. So what I've found is that when we talk about stuff that's worrying us excessively, and that's a balance we have to find, but when we talk about it excessively, it is actually a way of keeping it on our minds. And the more it's on our mind, the more it's, the more it's dominating our experience of life, and the more habitual it is, and the more entrenched it becomes, and the more it feels like it's inescapable and it's inevitable because we're talking about it nonstop. So that's why I think it's healthy for us to be with people who don't have exactly the same concerns. So it's a balance. We don't want to feel like we can't relate to other people, but it's helpful to realise that we don't have to pay attention to our thinking all the time, especially when it's unhelpful and unhealthy. So I remember talking to this guy a few years ago who was very distressed. I was volunteering for a suicide prevention helpline at the time. And he said, "What's the point of me talking to you? It doesn't change anything in my life." And he was really angry and upset. And I really felt the hopelessness of that perspective and the helplessness of feeling just a victim of circumstances. And there's nothing that you can do to feel better. And your attitude, what's going on within you, your thoughts and feelings, it's all irrelevant for life. You're just powerless. And I think that is quite a common perspective these days. Perhaps always, I don't know, that something as intangible as love doesn't really cut it in this material world. Love doesn't end poverty, it doesn't end injustice, it doesn't pay your bills, it doesn't look after your children. So it's a bit wishy-washy, it's a bit impractical, it's not very useful. So why am I making it the heart of my community and the focus of my community? Well, I do get the logic of that. Love doesn't pay your bills. You don't just feel love and then they get paid. Maybe that works for some people, but it hasn't worked for me. But I do think without love, it is very hard to function. Life to me just feels really cold, empty, lonely, depressing. And when I'm not in touch with that love, I lack energy to do what's required to live well. I remember very explicitly reflecting a while back on, in the face of all the terrible things that happen in the world, that are happening now, the traumas people go through, the cruelty they face, the inequality, the injustice, and even on a much smaller scale, things I found difficult in my life. What is it that makes life worthwhile? What makes it not only tolerable, but something that we feel excited about and want to continue experiencing? And the only conclusion that I could draw was that it is love. And what does that mean? I mean, an experience, a state, a feeling that lifts you up, that makes you feel hopeful, that comforts you, that consoles you, that strengthens you, that inspires you, that gives you helpful ideas. That's one thing that I've noticed since I've been feeling more love in my life and less judgment, is that I started writing poetry. Might not be the best poetry in the world, but I've enjoyed it. And I think that that's something that happens when we feel more love and less judgment. Creativity gets unleashed in different ways. And I'm really excited to see how that will happen for you in the community. So, although we can't see love directly, we can feel it directly and we can see the effects of it directly. And I think it's highly practical because it's what helps us function, it's what gives us energy, it's what gives us inspiration, it's what gives us tenacity and perseverance and resilience to get through life. And it's not passive, it's not wishy-washy, it is highly practical. Without it, it's very difficult to function. And with it, we can be inspired to take risks, fail, try again, and in the process, make the world a better place. And I know that might sound really grandiose, but I do think we all have that power, and that is the truth. Even if it's on a smaller scale than some other people, I still think it matters that you realise more of your potential in this life. You bring more of who you are into the world. And that's what I hope my community will support you with it doing. So what will we actually do in this community? I want it to be a presence-based community where we meet regularly. Personally, I think there are some downsides to communicating a lot online. I read a book a few years ago by Sherry Turkle called Reclaiming Conversation: The Power of Talk in the Digital Age. And I'd really recommend it. And in that book, she makes the point that a lot of our modern ways of communicating via text message, being online, not actually seeing someone's face or hearing their voice, is not great for our mental health. Now, it can be very practical, and I'm really grateful for modern technology that I can create this membership and bring people together from all over the world. So it's obviously not all bad, but it isn't, I don't think it's always conducive to slowing down, being fulfilled and nourished by other people's presence. And I also think that things like Facebook groups and other equivalents with communicating via text message can create a lot of noise. And I know for myself, it can really speed me up mentally. And that isn't always helpful, especially for me, because I've got a pretty busy mind. So I don't want my community to contribute to that. I want us to actually come together, slow down, be together regularly. And that's partly why I'm not intending to record any meetings. because listening to a recording is a very different thing from participating in a discussion or listening to somebody in real time. And I think we need to reclaim that. So because it's going to be an exclusively meeting-based community, it's going to be really crucial that there are meetings that you are available to come to. And so I will be happy to add meetings to the schedule so that there is at least one meeting that you can come to a week if you want to. So in terms of the type of meetings, I want to offer initially 3 types of meetings. I'm going to go into those now in more detail. It will probably evolve as I learn about your preferences, what works. But these kind of meetings are inspired by things I've found helpful myself. So the first one is called Whispers from the Heart, and that is going to be an opportunity to speak uninterrupted and to listen to other people doing the same. Then I'm going to offer some coaching hours if you want to get some support, some thoughts on things you're struggling with or projects you have. And the last one is discussion meetings, so conversation-based meetings where we take different topics. And again, I'm going to talk about that in more detail now. Whispers from the Heart. I'm now going to talk about this meeting format in a bit more detail, just to give you a sense of how it's going to work. So what we're going to do is we will divide the time equally between the people who are present, and then each person will get their chance to share, and the other people will listen. You will not be interrupted, so it's not going to be like a regular conversation, and it's not a coaching conversation where you're going to be getting feedback. It's going to be your time to share whatever you want, however you want. So you might share what's going on in your life, what you're struggling with, what you're excited about, what you're interested in, your insights, what you feel grateful for. It will be an opportunity to share vulnerably. And one way that I think that the format might make that easier is knowing that you won't get any commentary or advice afterwards. It will just be left there. There will be opportunities for that in other meetings. But in this meeting, I want it to be a really special time where you get to unburden yourself and share whatever you feel would be most helpful to you. And I don't want to restrict it just to talking. If you want to sit in silence for some of your time, that's absolutely fine. If you'd like to sing, that's fine. If you'd like to play some music that means something to you, that will be wonderful. If you write like I do and you want to share some of that, that will be lovely. If you want to share something that you've read that you find helpful. So I want to keep it quite open so that you really feel free to express yourself in the way that's most helpful to you. So unlike a lot of other meetings that I've been to, as I said, we're not going to comment on what other people share. The meeting is going to be really about taking responsibility for yourself, your own learning and your own growth. So when you're listening to other people, you may get thoughts about, what you think they need to see. But I'd really encourage you to bring it back to yourself and what you can learn and what you can see from what they're saying. And this meeting format is partly inspired by 12-step meetings that I used to go to regularly, which were amazing. When I was a teenager, I started going because I had trouble with eating. And at some of that time, I just couldn't stop eating. And I felt so desperate because being thin was the most important thing to me at that time. So I went to 12-step meetings, and it was such a precious opportunity to have that time to share. And I found it so helpful. It enabled me somehow, miraculously, through the power of the group, to get a grip more on my eating. And what I noticed in those meetings was there was a difference between when everyone shared from deep within themselves And when it got more into a kind of conversation, so even though people didn't interrupt one another, that was the format, sometimes people would start commenting on what other people had said. And they would say, well, when I was in that situation, I did this and that. And it was clearly an attempt to help that other person. And sometimes you could even say teach that other person. And I don't want this meeting format to be about that. I don't want it to be about teaching, trying to help other people, fix other people. I realise that might sound a bit selfish, but I actually think it's really generous to give people their own space to learn at their own pace in their own way and to respect that. And I also know how constraining it can be and unhelpful to get advice that you don't want, unsolicited advice. And it's very, very common in our culture and our society. And it comes generally from good intentions. People want to help. But it's not always helpful. And sometimes it can get in the way of listening as well, because we're so ready to jump in with what we think they need to see and what we think they need to learn, that we don't actually listen properly. And I've had that happen to me so many times where people have given me advice I didn't ask for and just wasn't aligned with my situation at all. So I'd like to read another poem now, don't worry, it's a short one, about this feeling of hurt that can arise when we're not properly listened to and we don't feel understood. You didn't listen. I said X, you heard Y. What is the point of me saying anything if I won't be understood? You smothered me with advice I didn't ask for. I want to get away so I can cry in private. I couldn't bear for you to add misunderstanding of my tears to the existing pile of misunderstandings. The trouble is, I want help. And I know you want to help me too. But somehow it's ended up like this. Hurt, rage, and distance. Two loving souls cut off from each other, severed at the point of reaching out. Loving intentions squashed under the weight of our frailties. May God help us to learn how to love each other better. So I hope this meeting format with uninterrupted sharing and deep listening will help to avoid some of the pain that we can experience when we're not listened to properly. And I also really hope that you'll find it fun, you'll enjoy it, and you'll come to look forward to that time as time for you to slow down, take a deep breath, unwind, and just be yourself and enjoy feeling supported and connected to other people. But of course, sometimes we do want input from other people on what we're going through. And so that's why I'm going to be offering coaching hours as part of the membership as well. So I just want to say a little bit about my perspective and my approach with coaching. It's different from therapy, or one way it's different from therapy is that I will share from my personal experience if I think it's relevant and helpful to do so. And I think that can reduce a sense of hierarchy, which can potentially be disempowering. If you think someone else has got the answers for you and you need to consult them, and sometimes you might think, well, and I can't even afford to get help from that person because, you know, they've got a lot of qualifications and they're very expensive, but they've got the answers that I need. It's a very disempowering perspective. And I think it's important that we all realise that we have our own answers and we often need support from other people in accessing them. So that's one way it's different from therapy. Another way that it's different is that my focus is not on diagnoses. So often if you go for therapy, it will be to treat a particular diagnosis, and I don't do that. My focus is on treating you as an individual and getting to know you. Personally, I think diagnoses, although they can offer relief to many people and some self-judgment and guilt maybe even can fall away, and that's really helpful, it can turn into a kind of limiting belief. So for example, I used to go to 12-step meetings where I would introduce myself as, the habit that I was struggling with. I would introduce myself as a binge eater and an anorexic. And there were times when I wasn't really binge eating or I wasn't anorexic, and I would still be introducing myself as that. And I began to question that, and at what point is it not true? And I got told that you have to keep going to meetings for the rest of your life, otherwise you will relapse. And I think we can get told lots of things about ourselves as if the truth about ourselves can be found outside of us from other people in a handbook. And I don't think that recognises that we're all individuals and we all have the power to have insights. And by having an insight, I mean to have a different relationship with the thinking that is causing our difficulties and suffering. And so that's really the purpose of coaching with me, is for you to have insights about your life, perhaps things you're struggling with or things you're excited about, to free up more of those resources within you so that you can go beyond a limiting story and enjoy life more. So if you have a diagnosis and you find it helpful to talk about that, you will be very welcome to do so. But I just feel like I need to be honest with you that it's not my focus. My focus will not be on consulting a handbook about, a diagnosis that you've got. I will be more interested in listening to you and what your experience is. And another thing I should say is that this is a community, so it will be a group experience, and that does mean that there will be a limitation on time. So I can't offer extended one-to-one coaching within the community, but I want to make sure there is a place you can come and seek support with what you're going through. It just can't be as in-depth as one-to-one coaching. And the final thing I want to say is that also you can come along to a coaching hour and you don't have to have coaching. You can just share. And sometimes, I think even often, that can be really powerful in itself. And it's often enough for us to see something afresh. Okay, so now for the third format, discussion and topic meetings. And in these meetings, we'll take either a topic or a particular resource as the focus of the meeting. So the intention is the same as all the other meetings, which is to help you experience more well-being and a stronger felt sense of love. And these meetings are really about bridging the gap from the abstract to the real world and your daily life. So what does that look like in terms of things like relationships, at work, parenting, stress, anxiety, social media, all these kind of things that we come up against in our lives? I think it can be really helpful to discuss them and learn from one another in terms of managing those things and how to navigate them wisely. So topics I've been really interested in for the past few years are productivity. That might sound a bit dry, like an Excel spreadsheet. But when I talk about productivity, I really mean living intentionally. Because one thing that I've noticed is that as my use of devices, phone and laptop, have gone up, my ability to concentrate and stay focused has gone down. And I really see that as being strongly correlated with my mental health. I don't feel good like that, not being able to derive satisfaction from being able to concentrate on something and work through something. And so I've been really interested in the work of Cal Newport, and I've read most of his books and listened to his podcast and everything. So that's something that I'd love to discuss if it interests you. Another topic that I'm really passionate about, and I haven't really explored that much, so I'd love to do it with you, is sleep and dreams. I think there's so much interesting research that's been going on in the last few years in terms of sleep. I've read a little bit about it. And there's so much richness, I think, in terms of sleep and dreams that we can potentially miss out on. I read something recently that people who are struggling with grief, people who dream more, get over their grief easier and more quickly than people that don't. Now, I haven't got the citation for that, but I think I know that when I've been more attuned to my dreams, I felt more kind of a wholeness that I can bring back into my waking life. So that's a topic I'm really interested in. Another topic that I think is of interest to quite a lot of people in terms of mental health is trauma. There are so many different ideas and therapeutic models, and I think there's a lot of helpful stuff that we can learn from different disciplines. But I want it to be really free and open to your suggestions of things that you're interested in. It could be music, art, painting, so many things. There's so much richness out there. So the second aspect of these meetings is looking at a particular resource. I held a series of workshops where at the beginning of each meeting I read a blog post that I'd written. But I want to open it up so it's not just about stuff that I write, although I can offer that as well. But I think it's crazy for any of us who struggle with anything not to see what's out there that could be helpful. And I'm really passionate about reading. It's something that I've been trying to get back into more recently because I think it can be really settling, trying to leave my phone outside my bedroom at night so that I can have some uninterrupted reading. I think the fact that it's long form enables us to calm down, slow down enough to perhaps learn something and see something new that could change our lives. So in terms of the books we read, obviously we can agree, we can vote on it, but it doesn't just have to be books on topics about mental health or spirituality. I'm really open to looking at a broad range of genres and subject matters. And I know for some people you might not want to buy books and you might not have the time to read books before meetings, and that's absolutely fine. You don't have to do that. You can just rock up and take part in the discussion. If we have agreed that we'll read a book, I can just read extracts from it. We can share our reflections on that. So please don't feel like you're going to have to do homework or preparation. I always would rather that you would come to a meeting than not come. So I think that's a wrap. Thank you very much for watching or listening. I hope to see you in the community soon. If you have any questions, you can get in touch. My email address is maria@mariamorgan.info. The final thing I want to say is that even though this is my community that I'm creating and I will take charge of the administration, the logistics, I will ultimately decide on the meeting format, I want there to be less hierarchy than I have experienced in some groups. I am not a guru. I do not have all the answers. I have a lot of frailties. I can be quite neurotic. I get anxious. I struggle with habits that, are not ideal. And the reason why I'm saying that is because I want to give you permission to be imperfect, just like me, and to I want there to be a feeling of equality, because I think anything else is really a lie. I don't think that anybody has the last word on the big questions of life. So I really want this to be a space where you feel that you are among equals, so we can have a really lively, honest, open, authentic discussion and hopefully enjoy life more together.